Hello, I'm going to do a quick situation update or report. This is going to be a condensed down version of what I did previously. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to talk about is the 15 or 30-minute rule. We'll use 30 minutes. What that is you want to be 30 minutes ahead in knowing something before everybody else knows it. So even though 30 minutes later people might learn the same stuff that you've learned and maybe even learn it more or to a greater depth than you currently know, if you're the initial one who knows something 30 minutes before everybody else does, at least for those 30 minutes you're considered an expert because you're the default guy. You're the only guy who really knows something about whatever the subject matter is, or one of the few that does. And this came into play because when AI first came out, I knew it was going to be big, so I jumped on it. And I got 30 minutes ahead. I did the basic stuff. I went out, got LangChain certified, I did a bunch of inference, pulled down a bunch of Hugging Face models, played a ton with AI art, experimented a lot, and I had the knowledge because traditional developers, for whatever reason, they were just kind of standoffish about large language models and AI stuff. For me, once I saw what Midjourney version 3 could do, which is laughable now, I knew it was going to be huge and I went all in. And that put me 30 minutes ahead, and that allowed me to transition from one job to another and kind of shift my career a little bit, which was really important for me to do, to say the least. But over this last year, and it has been a solid year of the stuff that I've been working on, I've been kind of stuck at the base level of AI stuff. And here's how I divide it out. You can call it 0, 1, 2. You can call it 1, 2, 3. You can call it low, mid, high. Let's use low, mid, high. The lowest level is essentially software engineering or software development. I actually like the developer term better, where you're basically doing APIs to large language models, getting inference back, you understand how to develop applications that take advantage of all that stuff. Probably learned Python along the way because that was the lingua franca of AI. And yeah, so that's kind of the role that I came into. And then there's the second middle tier, and I give a little overlap between tiers, but for the middle tier, that's people who really understand RAG pretty well. Like I'd say some lower tier people are doing basic RAG stuff, like I can do basic RAG stuff. But to really understand the nuances of it, chunking size, testing, and all that type of stuff, to mix it with full text search, to really understand the various algorithms, those are solid middle tier people. And then there's the top tier, which are the people that can actually build large language models from scratch, or have a really extreme high level mastery of mixing large language models together, being able to quantize them and understanding all the math behind them. So anyway, that's kind of the makers and the really high level RAG and fine tuning and data set creation, cleaning people. You know, that's the top. The middle tier are your good people at RAG and fine tuning, and then your lower tier are the API script kiddies. And I came in as a script kiddie lower tier, but I hoped immediately I would be bumped up on projects on the middle tier. And the problem is that hasn't really happened. That's partially my fault. It's partially just the demand of the role that I got hired is. I work for one of the biggest tech companies in the world as a contractor. I'm just a grunt clogging the wheels, but I was hired on to help a group adopt AI stuff, and most of the tasks, not all of them, there are a couple, the initial tasks were all just integrating the basic stuff to get them off the ground. So that's what I've been doing somewhat successfully for the last year. You know, some of my projects are good, and I'm like this general developer resource. So one thing that's a little frustrating is I occasionally get sucked off onto non-AI projects. In fact, one of the most successful projects I did was a one-off, and now that's become this huge business piece. Um, but anyway, yeah, so I recently talked to a bunch of people at another company that uses AI a lot. And what hit me is my 30 minutes of lead time is gone. And in some ways, I'm probably a little bit behind now. 5 or 10 minutes behind, or initially I was 30 minutes ahead. So it was a real wake-up call on me to see what they were doing and how far they've taken things, the type of skills they were specifically looking at, the questions they asked. And I think for the most part, when I was talking to these guys, they were, I could hang with them for sure, but it really showed me that there's lots of people in this game, and the progress never stops. And I'm kind of stalled out here, and I really need to get to here. So it's gonna be some fire lit under my rear. I've got a couple of these projects to clear out, and that's all about pursuing either at work or non-work or different work stuff to get me here at the highest level here. I don't think I can do this top one. I just don't have the math background and all that stuff for that, which is a bummer. I'll do some courses. I need to brush up on linear algebra and geometry and dot products and all that stuff, and I can do that to a degree, but I'm at this point in my state of my career to go back and get a statistics degree, and man, I could hit myself because I talked to the statistics department when I was in college, and I almost became a stat major, but I didn't. And if I could go back through time, that would be one of the corrections I would make. One of maybe 5 big corrections that I would make. Anyway, okay. So another point though is in doing this, I've got to learn. As a developer, I did mostly I was stuck in the Microsoft stack for way too long doing MVC, a little bit of Blazor, but I was doing Bootstrap for CSS and stuff that's it's pretty much antiquated now. Now everybody's doing Tailwind, Next.js, and React. So I've done Hello World stuff with React, but I haven't done any real big projects with React. So for me, I've got to dig into that and the whole build process, the minification process, really learn it. And I was kind of hoping that for my personal projects in my perfect world, I'd probably skip React and Next.js. Even though if I start getting into them, who knows, I might love it. But just having that much complexity on the client side as an old school developer like myself, I was just always kind of why? I get it if you're working at a site that's getting hundreds of thousands of hits per minute, obviously you want to push as much of the processing to the client. You want to send them lean JSON, have all the bindings and all the business logic as much as possible happen on the client to offload it on your server so you're not overwhelmed. Totally get that. And the fact that the last job I worked at, it was AngularJS, and they actually did a really good job of that, of pushing all the data to the client and then them manipulating it and only hitting the server as necessary. But that's a good problem to have. I consider that, for me on my personal projects, if I can do stuff with HTMX and just render chunks of HTML on the server and send them down, I could probably skip all that. But the default is React Next.js. Right now we currently live in a React Next.js world, so that's what I got to do. And Postgres. It's funny because I've used Postgres before and I swore I'd never use it again. There's nothing wrong with it, but I just think that the experience as a developer working with SQL Server and all the tooling for it is a little bit superior to what Postgres has. But at the same time, Postgres is essentially equivalent to SQL Server, maybe in some ways a little bit superior for larger data loads. And so yeah, back to Postgres, which is fine. I also love SQLite, but that's more on the smaller side of things. And in wall mode, I think it can support website, but that's a whole nother tangent. But anyway, the point here I'm making is I've got to learn a bunch of new stuff and some new computer or web frameworks and stuff. And here's the thing. I could take a manual that's like this thick, or React Next.js book, but the modern learning, everything moves too fast. You get these books and they're already outdated by the time you're halfway reading them. So another software engineer on YouTube, I wish I could find his channel, he's talking about once you reach a certain point, you can learn pretty much any language, like 80% of it really quickly by just experimenting, just getting out there. Don't go to the thick book, just start using it and you'll get 80% proficient. Like for me, Python, again, that's the easiest language to read or learn, so it's a bad example. But I was telling some other developers I know have been developing for years, or engineers, whatever they call us now. Used to be programmers and developers, and now we're engineers. But anyway, I was telling him, don't learn Python, just do Python. There's nothing really to learn, You start using it, and if you have a question, you just go to ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, and it'll give you the answer. If you want to get an A+, you can boot up Cursor or another one of the get an AI extension for Visual Studio Code or some of the other competitors now, and have it directly write code for you in the thing. So there are people that are just made to go to the big books and just read through them and think. I'm not like that. Those people will be top tier once they get done. Those are the people who are on the spectrum of autism that go up in software engineering, and they're going to be the top dogs. But most of us probably, if you're like grinding through all this, you're going to just kind of go, nah. But the great thing about AI now is to get that 80%, it's a lot easier now. And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to hit React Next.js, try to get that 80% tailwind, and then start grinding to get that last 20%. But with AI tools and stuff like that. So as an engineer or software developer or a programmer or whatever you want to call yourself, highly recommend just getting out there and getting that 80% of the language learned by experimenting and doing projects and stuff like that, and then grinding on that last 20% as needed, rather than trying to learn 100% of the language by meticulously going through all these tutorials and books and all this stuff. Just go out there and build, and when you hit walls, figure it out. And sometimes you're going to go down the wrong path and you might get burned and have to come way back and then go down the right path. But that's learning, and the more iterations you do it on different languages and stuff, the quicker that type of thing will come, because it's all kind of patterns. So yeah, I'm going to be hitting the books. And then another thing too, using that 80%, 100% analogy, I've talked to some people, like I talked to a coworker recently who feared, he's like talking about a lot of the apps he's written, they could be essentially written by AI, and he was a little bit fearful. I'm like, look man, here's the thing. AI, initially it could generate like 10% of the code for you, then 20%, maybe 40%. Now maybe in 2025 it'll be like 60, 70%, maybe even 80%. But if you're doing complex enterprise applications that have lots of moving parts, they're not 100% there yet. And I don't think it's going to be there for a while. You've got, let's say it's at 80%. This last little gap here, get my hands right, reversed. That'll, as the models continue to improve, that will shrink. AI will get you closer, and for basic apps, it might be able to generate them out. Like now, they can generate Snake in Python. But for the big enterprise apps, it's getting you closer. But at least for the next 5 to 10 years, I'm hoping that's what it'll be. Who knows? I could be wrong. There's still going to be people that understand things at kind of a high level, that have experience building applications, to take what AI can do and bring it to the finish line. And AI is going to get a little better. It's going to keep encroaching on that, but there's still going to be a gap for a while. So that's where you want to be. You want to be in the gap. And if you're an entry-level developer, you want to embrace AI and just have it write the code for you, and just go to the, you know, have it crank out as much as you can. You want to be using cursor and all these other things, and hopefully you can find yourself with a job later on because you can so efficiently use AI to do all these things. Because once a developer is 10x effective as developers were, say, 3 or 4 years ago, there's going to be a lot fewer of us. That much is true. And so you want to be the one who knows AI. What's the saying? What is the saying? You won't be replaced by AI. You will be replaced by a software engineer who knows AI, or whatever technical skill you want to swap in and out, or analytical skill, or business analyst skill, you know. Anyway, so yeah, you want to be the guy who knows AI front to back, bottom to center. So what other little thing I could give you in this status report? Yeah, stay 30 minutes ahead. Don't dither around, because things move fast and you'll find yourself 5, 10, 15 minutes behind. And if you're not moving quick and you get over 30 minutes behind, or even an hour behind, if you lose your job, then you being an hour behind or 30 minutes behind, you're not even parallel. You want to be out front. So if you find yourself in a realistic appraisal of where you're at, and you're finding yourself, competitive with everybody else, that's okay. But you really want to be ahead. You want to be 30 minutes ahead. But if you find yourself 15 or 30 minutes behind, you got to get cranking. So that's my goal for the upcoming years, to just crank. As a contractor, I've got about 6 months on my contract. I don't know what's going to happen to me at my current job after that. It comes in 6 months increments. I made the first 6 months. First one, no problem. Second one, they didn't even say anything. But this last 6 months, that takes more of a commitment on their part. So I don't know which way that's going to go. So yeah, I'm trying to get back into that. AI was revolutionary. It's a big wave. I knew it was going to be a huge wave. I initially got it before a lot of people did. They were still wrestling with it, so I was able to jump and surf on it a little bit. Now everybody gets it. So just being ahead is a lot harder. It's going to take a lot more work to get that 30 minutes ahead. So another thing in parallel with everything else is I'm racking my brain on, how do I come up with an AI agent that gets me rich? Or how do I come up with a software idea that everybody's going to jump on? Just inside or outside looking in, there's like a 1% chance I'll come up with something like that. But I'm trying to think outside the box. I'm going to do my standard, I'm a software developer. This is my career. I've added AI into the mix, which is good, but now that's baseline. That's nothing special anymore. So what can you do for me lately? I gotta figure out, how do I stand out in the software engineering space and the AI developer engineering space. And yeah. So what other things could I talk about? Take care of your health. My health has been declining, and sometimes when you work at home, like I'm 100% remote, it's a little easy to let yourself slide a little bit. I've let myself slide a little bit too much, so that's another thing that I'm going to be, I always say that and I make a little progress and sputter out, but I really want to live in another country. My son, I just added him to my health care. In order for me to only lose $100 per week by doing that, again, I love my son, I'm not mad at this, but I'm mad at the system, not my son. I had to cut my health care coverage to the absolute lowest, and he's on the lowest too, because I can't afford to do $200 or $300 a week increased. So that basically anything up to $5,000 you pay out of pocket, and then they generously pay a percentage of it after that. and then I brought in some catastrophic insurance on top of that. Um, and yeah, it's just peak. Here's another maxim for you. This is the one I wanted to give, and then that'll be the last one. Is if the right people don't fix the problem, the wrong people will. So we had a problem come up, and that was American healthcare was getting a little out of control with cost and legal stuff and hospitals being for profit and all this type of stuff. And then we had decent intellectual people that basically got bought out by this healthcare system, so they did nothing. They did not fix the problem. And then the wrong people came in and tried to fix it, and that's why we have Obamacare, which kind of sputtered out. I mean, it's still there, but now we've got this Franken system that just sucks, and it's got to be fixed, man. I can't. I mean, I literally am thinking about moving to another country just because I can't afford the health care here. Like, it's cheaper for me to move to another country and get on their base health care. And again, you can't just do that. You can't just walk over there and say, "Let me live here, give me health care." It's a lot more nuanced and complicated than that. But assuming I can do it, get on their basic health care and then do additional private care. Their clinics and stuff are cheaper. The doctors are typically equivalent and probably educated in America to American doctors. And it's just a better experience. I can't be going broke because, my sad tale is, I was a former yuppie, white picket fence, multiple properties, doing well, living high. Then, boom, life took all that away, my marriage, and my retirement gone, all that type of stuff. So now I'm like this dude who has, every time I get a buildup of resources, something comes along and just smashes it and wipes out my reserve. That happened twice this year. So now I'm just like, there was one point when my marriage failed where I was literally a day from being homeless. I had about $500 or $600 left. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go to the camping store. I'm just gonna buy a bunch of camping gear and just head out. I had a relative that was, thank God for her, stepped in and well, it was my parents. They stepped in and said, we'll help you out. We don't want that to happen to you. But how sad is it that you're an older guy who had all these properties and stuff, and then all of a sudden, boom, you're like, have to have your mommy and daddy. Thank God for them. I'm not mad. I'm way blessed. But having them, bail out. So there's another point of wisdom for you. Try to live on 80% of what you earn and squirrel away 20% of it. I kind of did that. It wasn't 20%. But anyway, life can sometimes still come and take that away, which is another thing I could bring up. And this is going long, so I want to stop it. Is in this life, you've got a lot of anchors. You've got your family, hopefully. Some of you don't. You've got, your extended family, your direct family, if you're married or whatever. You've got your job, you've got your friends, you might have churches or some other things. These are all things that kind of anchor you to reality, all this stuff over here. But nothing's guaranteed in life. I'm not saying those things will break. They may not, but there's nothing guaranteeing that they won't. And I've been through some stuff where I've lost everything, and the only thing I can say is I'm a horrible Christian, like horrible. Like when I say horrible, I'm not like one of these little righteous, self-righteous people who go, "Oh, I'm so horrible, I stubbed my toe and I said drat." No, when I mean horrible, and I shouldn't be smiling, I should be ashamed at losing my rewards and not being a good witness and doing all this stuff that's sin. But I just want to say, like, I'm horrible, but I am still born again. I still believe in Jesus. He did save me, not because of me, but because he's a good God. And he did it. He said, anybody who believes on me, Romans 5:24, John 5:24, Romans 10:9 through 13. You can look up those verses. He'll save you just by grace. For his grace by you're saved through faith, and this is not of yourselves, as a gift by God, or not by works. So a lot of people get tripped up on that nowadays. They want to become Catholics where it's works and salvation. No, it's just works flow out of salvation, but the actual salvation itself is Jesus saving you. Why did I bring that up? Because I know that all the other anchors can fail. God has not failed me once. And I can say that confidently. Now, I had expectations of life when I was growing up that did not happen. You know, I thought I would be healthy and strong the whole time. I'm still kind of strong, but healthy, no. I thought I would be married by like 22. I'd have this house. I'd have this life, you know, because that's just what happens in life. Nope, it didn't happen until later in life. And then when it did happen later in life, a whole bunch of storms hit. And eventually it was just too much, and that anchor collapsed. I am very fearful with all the politics going around. I've come close to losing relationships with family members because of the way I believe things and the way they believe things. So that anchor's kind of sketchy. Marriages, you think they're going to last forever. You think you love this person. You think you know them. And those can be taken away. Your friends, we've all had friends that have failed us probably, and I failed people as a friend. I have a good friend that I just wasn't that great of a friend to. I wasn't bad, but I was like, we should have been a top tier friend, and I just wasn't because I had so much stuff going on. The friendship that we had, I degraded without letting them know, and that was just bad. So I've been on both ends of that. But what I'm saying is, God in His grace looks at us, wicked sinners, and He will save us. Yes, He gives you a new spiritual self, and so you still have your fleshly self that you're supposed to regard as dead and not feed it, and you have your spiritual self. But this fleshly self, you don't get rid of that until you get resurrected, or in the presence of God, whichever comes first. Until then, it's always going to be fighting for attention. It's always going to be hungry. It's always going to be wanting stuff. And you have a choice to feed your spiritual side or your flesh side, but they're still there struggling. So where am I going with all that? The anchors of life. Jesus has not failed me. When I had expectations that weren't met, but God in His Word doesn't promise you the white picket fence lifestyle. But I have known when I've been in the depths of facing total ruin, God stepped in. He stepped in through people. He stepped in through jobs. He stepped in through motivating me to get into AI so I could jump to another thing where I was, even though the job I was in was good, I was just hating life every day being there. And because it wasn't a good fit. You got to have a good fit. Where the job I'd worked previously, I'd been there for over a decade. People were like family. And then I go into this like hardcore engineering job where everybody's like, just was not a good fit for me. But they were good people, just not a good fit. So yeah, this is the last thing, it's the anchorage. Anchor your life on things that don't break. I believe that Jesus, and I've experienced this in my life, has kept me tight. That doesn't mean that the evil I've done in my life hasn't affected me. I mean, look at me, I'm kind of the sin of gluttony has hit me hard. There's been ramifications for things that I've done or didn't do. But at the same time, God has intervened when I've been about to slide off the edge of the cliff. So pick your anchors and know that earthly anchors, no matter how solid they seem, can break on you. Jesus won't break on you. And that comes to the conclusion of this. I'll go 30 minutes because then I need to get off. I'm facing from going from 30 minutes ahead to now like 15 minutes behind. I've got a limited window where my job exists that probably won't exist in about 6 months. Is it? No, it's less than that. Ooh. So Yeah, it's about 6 months. So I've got I'm hoping God will be there and bail me out again. I'm going to do the work, not not because works earn anything, but I mean if God's motivating me and He's trying to push me in certain directions, I want to be attentive to that. So I move as He directs. And right now I know that my 30 minutes is gone, and I've got to get them back, or 10 minutes at least, or do something else. So that's where I'm at. Anyway, for those of you who watch this, who are cloning my voice with AI to call my parents, I wish you a good night. It just happened a couple times.